Now's the time for a great deal on a new Honda. It's time to take an adventure with rugged capability and commanding style. Check out the Honda Ridgeline, Pilot, or CR-V. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 3.99% APR on a 2025 Pilot, a 1.99% APR on a 2025 Ridgeline, or a 2.99% APR on a 2025 CR-V.
See dealer for financing details.
Hey there, it's Lauren Chulgin. Our colleagues at the Boston Globe have a really dynamic new podcast out, and we're proud we get to share the first episode with you. The podcast is called Spotlight Snitch City, and it's produced by the Boston Globe's award-winning Spotlight team. I'm personally excited I get to share this with you because it was made by two colleagues I really respect. Dugan Arnett is the host and reporter behind the show, and the stuff he uncovers is just astounding. And Dugan was guided on his first podcast journey by my pal, Max Green, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning producer. Snitch City is getting a lot of great press attention, too. The Guardian and the Financial Times call it a must-listen podcast. This show brings you inside the secret world of police informants through one small city at the forefront of America's drug war, New Bedford, Massachusetts. The podcast features cases that have never been told publicly before. And it investigates how officers have exploited the secrecy of the informant system to enrich themselves, break laws, protect drug dealers, and attack perceived enemies, all with impunity. The episode I'm going to play for you begins on the docks of New Bedford, where whispers are going around about a rogue police officer harassing fishermen and stealing drugs. It all comes to a head one night aboard a scalloping boat. Before I hit play, make sure to follow Spotlight Snitch City wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, here's the first episode.
Before we begin, this story includes strong language. Please take care when listening. It's a warm summer night in 2018, and there's a strange situation unfolding aboard a scalloping boat docked in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
911 court line, what's your emergency? Yes, but you don't got no permit to be on this boat.
The caller says there's an intruder on board.
And you said that someone's on your boat and that's not supposed to be on the boat? Where at, sir?
This is the Crystal Ice dock in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
The caller is a fisherman on the Little Tootie, a boat docked for the night along the city's waterfront.
And you said it's by the docks?
Yes, sir.
The call comes in at about 9:30. Some crew members are sleeping. Others are making final preparations for the next day's fishing trip down the Atlantic coast. When suddenly, there's a loud banging on the door, and a frenzied man pushes his way inside.
Does he have any weapons on him?
Yeah, he has a pistol on his side.
He's dressed in all black. His eyes are bloodshot, and he has a gun.
Is the person still there?
Well, I don't know what's going on.
The scene is chaotic,
Hold on a moment.
and the dispatcher's trying to figure out what's going on.
He said he was stopped, but he doesn't have no warrants.
The fisherman is telling the dispatcher that the guy on his boat claims he's a police officer.
So you think he's lying, he's not an officer?
No, sir, but he does have a badge. He said he's a security or something.
Around this time, a call goes out to police radios across town.
Control to all units. Do I have anybody out at the Crystal Ice dock? We have a male calling stating that he's speaking with somebody who's claiming to be a police officer, but he thinks that this person is lying. Control to Unit 10.
Unit 10.
10, could you make your way down to the Crystal Ice warehouse just to see exactly what's going on?
10-4 en route.
As police try to figure out exactly what's going on, the message reaches an officer in a nearby patrol car.
A male identifying himself as a police officer is breaking into a boat.
Here's Mark Raposo.
I think at that point I'm probably already putting two and two together.
Immediately, he has a bad feeling because he suspects he knows who might be causing the trouble. A colleague he's spent the past year trying to avoid. A young officer named George Santos. The waterfront is quiet when Raposo arrives. He parks his cruiser, makes his way down to the dock, cautiously steps aboard the boat, and into a scene that defies explanation.
It's George wearing a black Marine SR t-shirt, sweatpants. He's there in his own car. He's got a gun.
Raposo's colleague, George Santos, is off duty.
And I don't even think he has a radio. What is going on here? And I'm already going, oh man, give me a break. Like, why did I have to be working right now, you know?
Dispatch lets the caller know.
Okay. Sir, that is an officer. We checked.
You said it is an officer?
Yes, it is an officer.
When Raposo boards the boat, he finds a bunch of angry fishermen, shouting over each other. They're convinced that this officer, with bloodshot eyes, is here to rob them.
He just shows up and he just says, I'm looking for drugs. I know there's drugs on the boat.
Nothing about the situation makes sense to Raposo. What possible reason could Santos have to be here?
George, what the fuck are you doing? What is this? Well, they got drugs. My CI says there's drugs on the boat.
Santos tells Raposo he's got a confidential informant who told him that there were drugs aboard the little Tootie. These two words, confidential informant, are like magic. As soon as they're uttered, a cloak of secrecy takes over. What's exchanged between a cop and a CI is known only to them, and can open doors that are otherwise closed shut. These words trip a wire for Raposo.
I'm like, whoa, and I immediately start to back out of the boat. And I think I tell George, hey George, get out of the boat. Get out of the boat. And I tell one of the crewmen, lock the boat, close these doors, don't let anybody in here.
This whole situation looks really bad to Raposo. He thinks it's a crime scene. It looks like George Santos is here, using his power as a cop and the supposed word of a confidential informant to force his way onto a boat and steal drugs.
You know, is this really happening?
Well, what did it look like?
It looked like a drug rip. It looked like a drug rip. It looked like something out of a fucking movie.
A drug rip.
Pretty much bad guy robbing a drug dealer. That's what it is, except in this instance, the bad guy is a cop.
The cop who showed up on the little Tootie that night, wild-eyed, flashing a gun, and demanding drugs, says he was tipped off by a confidential informant, a claim he knew would grant him, a police officer, certain liberties. You see, informants are the backbone of nearly every drug investigation in America. With little more than the word of a CI, cops can launch investigations, break down doors, and upend lives. Today, police are allowed to direct and oversee this vast anonymous army with no oversight, no regulation, and no transparency. Until relatively recently, many departments didn't even have rules in place about using informants. Surprisingly, some still don't. How it works is all up to police, and it's nearly all done in secret.
It is shadowy. It is underground. And it's a game to a lot of these police officers. And to win, they have to think like the criminal. And they start acting like the criminal.
I'm Dugan Arnett, an investigative reporter with the Boston Globe Spotlight team. I've spent the last 2 years inside this secret world of police informants, where the stakes can be life and death. And no one wants you to know how it really works. Not prosecutors, not judges, not police. And certainly not the informants themselves, who can pay dearly for cooperating with cops. Trying to get to the bottom of all this has taken me to the heart of one small city at the forefront of America's drug war. New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Snitch, informant, CI. You didn't want to be labeled a rat, not around here.
In a nation addicted to drugs, police across the country have become addicted to informants. And nowhere is that more apparent than in this historic port city, the backdrop of Moby Dick, where police have been empowered to use informants to take down dealers by almost any means necessary.
If there's a level playing field, there'd be no war on drugs because they wouldn't succeed.
You live and die in this business on informants and information.
Did I lie? Yes. Do your officers lie? Yes, everybody lies.
My investigation has taken me from the docks of New Bedford to the homes of drug traffickers, to remote parking lots where skittish cops will only meet at night. I'm going to tell you about several cases of police misconduct, all involving informants. And you'll hear from the people on all sides of this, including informants themselves, reluctant to snitch and yet still caught up. I've reviewed thousands of pages of court records and internal police documents, going back more than 3 decades. And what I've found in case after case is officers who've exploited this informant system in almost every way imaginable, to enrich themselves, break laws, protect kingpins, and attack perceived enemies. And they've done it all with impunity. This podcast is an unvarnished, behind-the-scenes look at this clandestine world, where total secrecy has allowed corruption and misconduct to fester. From the Boston Globe's Spotlight team, this is Snitch City. Episode 1, Officer Pastillas.
All right, Duke.
Kind of busy today, but it looks like construction types. I'm at New Bedford's waterfront with my editor, Brendan, walking the docks where the fishermen made that 911 call. This story begins at the site of the Little Tootie, because what happened here is a glaring example of abuse within the confidential informant system.
All right, give me a little walkie-talkie here.
We're heading back to the docks, hoping to run into some fishermen throughout the day today and see what we can find out.
In many ways, the waterfront is the heart of New Bedford, and Officer George Santos was detailed to the city's Marine unit. This was his territory. His job was to check boat licenses, patrol the harbor, that sort of thing.
Beautiful morning, clear sky, some weird looks from fishing.
I've been told that the fishing community here is tight-knit, and that if I want to learn more about Santos, this is the place to start.
Mind if I take this thing?
No, go ahead. He can follow me.
Brendan and I approach a couple of grizzled fishermen, throwing lobster traps.
So, for those who don't understand or know New Bedford, how important is the industry? How important are folks like you to the city, to the state, to the country?
Well, New Bedford is the largest producing fishing port in the entire world.
He tells us he's been fishing here for 50 years.
What are you piloting today, Aaron?
A boat named Max and Emma, a 90-foot steel offshore lobster and crab boat.
New Bedford's fortunes have always been tied to the ocean. If you know anything about the place, it's probably that it was once the hub of the whaling industry. And in the 19th century, that made it one of the richest cities in the world. This is where Herman Melville set off on the whaling voyage that inspired Moby Dick. Today, New Bedford still has an old world feel, with cobblestone streets running through the city center. There are fish houses lining the waterfront, and the scent of briny ocean air is hard to escape. The city's fishing port still brings in the most valuable haul in the country. But few people here actually perceive that, and the city can feel a little down on its luck.
Drugs are a big problem. How many clinics they got in the city?
Yeah. And you've noticed that, you've seen that play out at the docks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The reason I sold my boat, I was in Westport Point. We couldn't get no help. I had to get rid of at least 5 or 6 different American kids because of drugs. They can't show up. They don't show up on time. If they show up, they're screwed up.
In this city of 100,000, overdoses are routine. The local drug court is one of the busiest in the state.
It seems like there's a bit of a pill problem in New Bedford. I mean, a pill problem.
A little bit?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Epidemic. Yeah, epidemic. Yeah.
Bad.
Real bad.
Bad.
Everywhere you go.
The search for drugs, and especially pills, draws a lot of folks to the docks. Santos included.
I don't know the officer name, but the nickname is the people. He said pastillas because he all time looking for drugs, you know.
Yeah.
He has told me like 2 times. He said, "Hey, I'm looking for drugs, man. I'm here for a job, you know."
This fisherman, Tony, says he's had multiple run-ins with Santos. and that everyone down here knew the officer by a nickname, pastillas, pills in Spanish.
He stopped you.
Everywhere. When the cop stop, he say, "Hey, Jimmy, just driving license, nothing now. Just put the windows down and looking for pastillas." What the fuck, man? What are you fucking doing, He looking for pastillas, like just like that, It's incredible, man. Everybody is scared,
Tony says Santos would pull people over and immediately begin searching their cars, squeezing them for information.
And he push. Oh, you go to the jail, you got a lot of drug. Let me know who moved drug. Let me know who do it.
He wants people to be informants to tell him and give him information.
Yeah.
That's what he wants.
Yeah, I gotta come.
What Tony's describing is wild. Santos stopping people without cause, searching them for drugs, and then pressuring them to become informants. But he wasn't a drug cop, and cultivating informants wasn't part of his job description. When I first came to the story, I had the same sense of how police use informants that you might. They build relationships with people who are supposedly in or close to the drug trade and offer them a pass, a plea bargain, occasionally a few bucks, in exchange for information. Now, more than 50 years into America's war on drugs, law enforcement's reliance upon confidential informants has become nearly absolute. Still, it's not supposed to look anything like what Santos was doing. George Santos was a local kid. He attended the city's vocational high school. He's short. In photos I've seen, he's got round cheeks, a bit of dark stubble, and a sweet smile. People who know him say he's friendly, hardworking, if a little unpolished. One story I heard sticks out to me, that as a police cadet, he sometimes had to be told not to wear sweatpants to work. But as an officer, Santos quickly got a reputation. Other cops were wary of him. Some kept their distance, including Mark Raposo.
George is a street guy, reputation is kind of a reckless and wild guy. He made a lot of contacts on the street. Made a lot of brazen, bold moves on the street, chased people into houses, searches, extraordinary amount of vehicle searches.
Before his life collided with Santos, Raposo was part of New Bedford's police Marine unit. A dream job.
When I got the job, I was ecstatic. I loved being on the water. I loved everything about the job. The boats, the waterfront, the people, the fishermen. The best job in the department, in my opinion.
Working on the Marine unit was pretty straightforward. Maintain relationships with fishermen and boat owners, and provide security on the docks.
You get to ride around on boats in the summer. You get a take-home car. You're diving. You're not dealing with... you're dealing with some fishermen, but you're not dealing with very difficult people. That job was a prize.
But it also required a lot of training. Diving certifications, Coast Guard licenses, years of experience. Qualifications that George Santos didn't have.
So, to my surprise, when I start hearing George's name being floated around, I can't even really believe it. He doesn't know how to run the boats. He doesn't dive. He doesn't know anything we do down there at all.
Nonetheless, Santos gets the job. And almost immediately, there's fireworks. One night, after a training exercise on Martha's Vineyard, a bunch of cops go out for drinks. Raposo says he watches Santos try to pick a fight with one of the police instructors.
And the worst of it all is we're wearing shirts that say New Bedford Police. Like, what the fuck are you doing? We're not even in our city. We're guests over here. What are you doing?
Santos gets sent back to his hotel room. And from there, he calls Raposo, screaming and threatening to tear the hotel room apart.
Now I'm nervous now because he's in there, my gun's in there, and he's hanging out of our hotel room window screaming, "Suck my dick," loud. Like loud.
Their boss, the Marine unit supervisor, is there too. So Raposo expects some kind of fallout the next day.
I thought that was it. I said, hey, well, he's done after this. There's no way. He's not going to be able to stay here.
But there are no consequences. And this wouldn't be the last time police higher-ups let things slide when it came to Santos. Raposo says that's because the department valued one thing above all else: stats. Car stops, citations, arrests, These numbers are the lifeblood of modern policing. They make for good headlines, lead to promotions. Bosses can point to them to show they're getting results. And in New Bedford, nobody could fill a stat sheet like George Santos. He was constantly among the department's most active officers. Supervisors raved about his work ethic. His numbers were written up in the local news.
The only reason George was there is because they look at a piece of paper, and if those numbers are high, that's it. It doesn't matter the baggage that you bring. Nobody cares about what you did or what rules you bent to get them. At that point in time, that would put you on the top. Bring it numbers.
Many officers told me what Santos really wanted was to be a drug cop. And he tried to turn his cushy Marine unit gig into just that. Searching for pills, squeezing people, and trying to build up a stable of informants.
He would mention that he was always working to cultivate informants because his real goal was to get into narcotics, but they would never take him there.
Drug cops are encouraged to develop informants, and they do this by finding people who are on the outs and forming a relationship. Of course, it's largely one-sided and fraught in a lot of ways, but still a partnership, one that's shrouded in secrecy. In theory, this protects informants and their identities because it's dangerous to snitch. But the secrecy has another effect. It leaves the role of police and the rules they play by completely unknowable and opaque to anyone else. Trust me, I tried. The Globe requested information about informants from every law enforcement agency in the state. We weren't asking for names or identifying information, but basic things. How many do you have? How much do you pay them, if at all? And a number of the 400 or so agencies just didn't respond. New Bedford was especially resistant to my questions. For over a year, I requested records that are supposed to be available to the public. Time and again, the department delayed or didn't respond at all. New Bedford's city attorney got involved. Then the Globe's attorney got involved. We're still battling with the city over the records, but we're using some of the ones we did receive to tell this story. All told, this secrecy makes accountability almost impossible. Raposo says it was this lack of transparency that enabled Santos to get away with everything.
There were CIs who were even reporting this stuff back to certain people, and still nothing was getting done. CIs that were telling guys in the drug unit that this kid is doing stuff that he ain't supposed to, and it just carried on and on and on.
Around this time, another person was watching George Santos become increasingly erratic. A fisherman named Freddie Loya, who's been coming into New Bedford's port for nearly 35 years.
I was born in Texas, raised in Mexico. 91, I got here into Massachusetts.
Freddie's a jovial guy with long salt and pepper hair. He's also captain of the Little Tootie. Tell me about the first time you encountered pastillas.
Honestly, he was polite and he didn't have no reason to pull us over, So he explained to me I'm kind of on a task force to combat all these opioids and pills, the smuggling and dealing, like he was doing a good thing.
At first, Freddie was glad to hear that someone might actually be doing something about the pill problem plaguing the docks. But then Santos pulled him over again and again and again.
So it got to the point where if we be here for a week, we get pulled over for four times on a week, trying to search for drugs and pills.
And one afternoon, it all comes to a head.
He pulls me over. Oh, you know the drill. We gotta check the car. So he still checked the car. He said, "You're okay, you can go."
Santos doesn't find anything and sends Freddie on his way. But soon after, Freddie's son-in-law, who was in the truck with him, notices something. There'd been a bottle of prescription pills, Adderall, in the truck, medicine that Freddie's wife had legally. And now, it's missing.
I said, "What? No, he didn't." "Yes, he did, Freddie. I saw him." So I opened the middle compartment and checked for the pills. The pills weren't there.
Freddie speeds back to the waterfront and finds Santos parked near the docks.
I was pissed, I ain't gonna lie. I was pissed. So I go immediately up to him, and he's sitting inside his car. He doesn't even bother. He's just like sitting over here, what you want? Talking to me like he's the big boss or something. I say, I want my pills back. I say, those are not your pills. Those are my wife's pills, and she's gonna be pissed at me if I don't got those pills when I get back.
Santos says he'll give Freddie the pills back, but he wants something in return.
So he's like, well, you're gonna help me out. He wanted to know what people is bringing drugs in the Bedford. I said, I don't know nothing about it,
So he steals your pills, and then when you go to get them back, tries to basically turn you into an informant for him.
Yeah, that's kind of what he wanted, Yeah, like an exchange.
Santos wants Freddie to snitch. To Freddie, it seems more like extortion than a police tactic. Either way, he has no intention of working with Santos. Eventually, he gets his wife's pills, and they go their separate ways.
What can you do? Put a complaint on the police, to the captain of the police? Nothing's gonna happen.
Freddie's lack of faith in the New Bedford police would turn out to be pretty well-founded. I examined countless police reports, internal affairs files, and department disciplinary records. And I can say, Freddie and the other fishermen I talked to are just the tip of the iceberg. I've identified half a dozen people who say they had drugs taken from them by Santos. Not seized as part of a drug arrest, but stolen. Many of their stories are remarkably similar. A questionable car stop, an illegal search, and then a robbery.
George picked his people he would deal with, specifically due to their immigration status.
Officer Mark Raposo.
They don't speak English, I think in his mind, I believe less likely to complain, less likely to understand that they're being subjected to an illegal search.
Santos cast a pall over the waterfront. For decades, the docks had served as a gathering place for immigrant fishermen, a kind of safe haven where they could swap stories or blow off steam. But as his behavior escalated, even those who never touched drugs grew increasingly uneasy. Some began avoiding the waterfront altogether. And Freddie says fishermen began to whisper about taking matters into their own hands.
It starts getting the frustration out. They start getting mad, like, yeah, we should do something about him. Fuck him. He's just a cop. He's only one, we're a lot, and this and that, People was thinking, about really getting rid of him,
It could have just been some alcohol-infused bravado. But to hear him tell it, there were honest conversations about violent revenge. And around this time, early one morning in September 2017, there was a suspicious fire at Santos' home.
His Crown Vic, the front of it just caught on fire. It was early in the morning, 4, 5, 6 in the morning.
George Santos's take-home cruiser was on fire. Authorities said the blaze was likely caused by an electrical issue or equipment failure. But Raposo and a bunch of current and former officers I spoke with don't believe the official version.
He ruffles so many feathers that someone lights his cruiser catches itself on fire in front of his house.
A mysterious fire, threats, illegal search and seizures, it was all getting to be too much for Raposo. At one point, he tells his supervisor he no longer wants anything to do with George Santos.
And I said, I'm not going to be part of this. This is not a secret what this guy does. I flat out telling him, I'm not backing that kid up. I'm not doing it.
But Raposo is complaining about a guy who is a rock star in the department. And he quickly learns that speaking up against a fellow officer can have consequences. Raposo says it happens fast. The schedule he's had for years suddenly changes. He loses his take-home cruiser. His supervisor starts to target him for minor infractions. It's clear to him that this is the price of sticking his neck out.
Okay, no problem. I'll take the hit.
Raposo's a veteran cop. He's seen a lot in his 20 years on the job. But his problems with Santos were far from over. And even he couldn't foresee what was coming.
I was thinking, I can't be around this stuff. This guy's going to get in big trouble. And then in the end, I get in trouble.
The night of the 911 call, aboard the Little Tootie in summer 2018, that's when the stories of George Santos, Mark Raposo, and Freddie Loya converge. So tell us about that night. So you're docked.
Well, that night, it was the end of a long day for me.
Freddie was exhausted after a day aboard the Little Tootie, captaining a crew of a half dozen. He hopped into his truck to run an errand before bed.
I think I was like minutes away when I got the call.
It was a member of his crew, and the guy sounded panicked.
He calls me and he tells me, there's a cop in here and now he's searching. I asked him, how does this cop look? So he tried describing me the cop. I need exactly the description of Santos. And then he tells me, but he's not wearing a uniform.
What's going through your head when you get this call?
First of all, I'm upset. I start getting upset and mad immediately, Second of all, as I am on the call, I realize that he's doing this illegally and that he's not on duty, So that's when I asked to call 911.
911 call line, what's your emergency?
Yeah, we got it, but he don't got no permit to be on the boat.
Within minutes, Mark Raposo steps aboard the Little Tootie and tries to make sense of what he's seeing.
I mean, he's a cop, but he's not working as a cop. He's not really dressed as a cop. He tells us, hey, I have information that there's drugs on this boat, but he doesn't call anybody about it. I'm going to see what I can grab, and I'm going to make my way home.
It's yet another of Santos's questionable searches. Another push for drugs. Vague talk about informants. But this time, Freddie's certain that Santos has taken it too far. As he races back to the boat, he slams the steering wheel. He's elated.
Oh, I finally got you, motherfucker. Yeah, I'm never gonna forget that. Never. Yeah, finally, he made that mistake that I was kind of waiting, Yeah.
Despite all the chaos and tension aboard the boat, the encounter on the Little Tootie ends pretty anticlimactically. Raposo coaxes Santos from the boat. A supervisor arrives. They tell the fishermen to lock up. Everyone goes their separate ways. Raposo returns to the station and tries to tell a sergeant what he just witnessed.
I even get a fucking piece of paper, and we're back at the station after everybody leaves, and I write drug rip, and I fold it and I put it on his desk.
In the most blunt terms possible, Raposo advises the sergeant that another officer just tried to rob some fishermen of drugs. In his words, a drug rip. Like Freddie, Raposo is sure that the Little Tootie has to be the final straw. Both of these guys, each terrorized by Santos in their own way, think this time police can't ignore Santos anymore. And they were right.
This is an administrative interview taking place at the Office of Professional Standards of the New Bedford Police Department. Subject of this interview is Officer George Santos, and he is accompanied by representation, Mr. Andrew Gambasini. Could you state your name for the record, please?
George Santos.
I got my hands on the internal affairs file, as well as recordings of some of the interviews, including this one with Santos, where he struggles to recall even basic details.
I can't recall now. I mean, I've been under a lot of stress.
Understandable.
Financially, everything going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to expect me to remember every detail.
That's why we're just asking.
Okay.
I've read a lot of internal affairs reports from many different police departments, and they all tend to follow a similar pattern. But the 230 pages dedicated to George Santos and the Little Tootie are unlike anything I've ever seen. And what quickly becomes clear with each new interview is that the department's George Santos problem extends far beyond a single night aboard a scalloping boat.
I'm familiar with Santos outside of work, so I kind of know his behaviors. So I kind of figured that it was something that I would suspect for him to do.
Caitlin Sylvia was working 911 dispatch when the call from the Little Tootie came in.
I mean, it's not a call we get every day. It's never happened before, so I would say I hope to never come across it again. At first, it was frightening. I mean, we didn't.
She tells police she immediately had an inkling that Santos might be involved. Because by then, she'd already had some troubling experiences with him.
Just coming over the radio screaming, and then when you try to raise him, you can't get him and you have no idea where he is.
She's not the only one who tells police about his misconduct. A half dozen fishermen also come forward. saying that Santos took their drugs. Some said they were harassed, searched illegally. And almost all say there are other victims, people who are too nervous to speak up.
State your name for the record, please.
Michael Roussel.
And Michael, you also...
Investigators also interview a former police officer who now works security at a hotel where a lot of fishermen stay. Michael Roussel tells police that Santos was illegally searching hotel guests.
They told him he could not be bothering our customers like that.
Roussel says he repeatedly heard stories from fishermen about a rogue cop obsessed with pills.
What I was told by the guys was that he was stopped them, asked them if they had drugs, if they had pills. Do you have pills on you? And if they had pills on them, he would take the pills, give them back a couple, keep the pills. Even a couple of them had coke and heroin. He gave them the coke and heroin back, and he kept the pills. No arrests, no charges. I says, look, you guys are going to come forward. I says, he can't do this. But they're afraid to come forward because I says, listen.
I don't know why Santos was stealing pills. After the Little Tootie, he was ordered to take a drug test, and the results came back negative. That surprised some of his colleagues, who told me they believed he had a drug addiction. Either way, it's clear that Santos's behavior was an open secret to almost anyone working on or near the waterfront. That's why, when Raposo got that call from dispatch, right away, he figured it was Santos on the boat, acting erratically. And he suspected Santos had no good reason for being there, that it wasn't police work. Here's what Santos told investigators about what happened that night. He's home that evening when an informant calls with a tip. It's big, 100 grams of opiates aboard a scalloping boat docked in the harbor. Santos says he tells a supervisor, hurries over, boards the boat, and you've heard the rest. But as the investigation unfolds, police records show significant problems with that story. After reviewing all these police files, listening to the tapes, and talking to dozens of sources, I can tell you, his account doesn't really hold water. Crew members say they never gave Santos permission to board the boat. Phone records suggest he lied about notifying a supervisor. But the biggest, most glaring issue is the supposed confidential informant.
At some point during the June 21st, were you contacted by...
Yes, sir.
The audio from the police department is heavily redacted.
And what time was that?
I don't recall the exact time.
How do you contact him when you call him? How do you contact him?
He calls me. We talk often.
Do you have his cell phone number on you?
He has different numbers.
Would you be willing to share your call records with the department?
Santos's attorney jumps in.
No. No, sir.
Santos repeatedly tells investigators that his story about the CI is true. But when they try to drill down on details, he's evasive and cagey.
I'm not 100% certain if I called him that night or he called me. I'm not 100% certain. Let me rephrase that.
When they try to push him further about his justification for boarding the boat, his answer is pretty telling.
Based upon the advice of my attorneys, I invoke my federal and state constitutional rights to remain silent and decline to answer that question.
Okay.
George Santos said an informant told him there were drugs on the Little Tootie. But after months of investigating the story, I can tell you, there was no informant that night, at least not by any reasonable definition of the word. In fact, it doesn't appear Santos ever had any registered informants. I wish I could tell you for sure, but the department refused to hand over that information. So either Santos invented a CI out of thin air, or he took the word of an off-the-book source. And remember, Santos isn't a drug cop. He's in the Marine unit. So no, Santos' story doesn't hold up. And Mark Raposo? Well, he's blunt about what he saw. A drug rip.
Even if he did, say in a perfect world, he does have this person as a CI. They tell him, hey, we got this stuff on the boat. The last thing anybody's going to do is put their sweatpants on, throw a radio in their back pocket, drive their car down there, not tell anybody what they're doing, and start ransacking a boat with 4 or 5 guys in it.
In New Bedford, as internal investigators work the Santos case, Officer Mark Raposo gets a letter, a subpoena. Prosecutors are considering potential criminal charges against Santos, and a grand jury has been convened. Raposo is asked to testify.
So I get the grand jury summons, and I go there. I want to say I go there to testify that day, and I walk in, and I said, "Hey, let's have a little sit down. Let's talk."
He's leery. For months, he'd been sounding the alarm on Santos, having his complaints ignored. Now, he's being asked to breach policing's most fundamental code, to testify against another officer, to break the blue wall of silence. In a way, he's being asked to snitch. Think about it. Prosecutors are asking Raposo to work with them. It's a big step, and he wants reassurances.
Well, I says, it depends what you're gonna do. Are you gonna follow this through? And his words to me is, I'm gonna take this wherever the evidence takes me. He tells me this.
So Raposo agrees.
You know, you can't manipulate this as a grand jury now. You can't. This can't be manipulated now. This is gonna go. This has wheels now. This is it. These guys are gonna have to answer now.
Still, a number of anxiety-inducing scenarios play out in his head. Will he be targeted or scapegoated? Is he a whistleblower? Most importantly, Raposo wonders whether he and his family are safe.
George at the time was erratic as can be. And this is a guy who's proficient with firearms, not only on patrol level. This guy worked on SWAT for a little while. You know, he was off the wall at this time. You know, he was really upset with his former co-workers. And I can't imagine he was upset with any of them more than he was with me.
Expecting an indictment, Raposo even makes plans to send his wife and kids to stay with his in-laws.
My wife knew. You know, I confided in her and told her a lot about what was going on. And she was very nervous.
Eventually, the grand jury wraps, and Raposo's worst-case scenario plays out. There are no charges, no arrests, and no one gives Raposo a heads-up. He only finds out when he calls the prosecutor for an update. And this is when Mark Raposo, police officer for nearly 2 decades, seemingly loses faith in the criminal justice system.
You can be a police officer asked to testify at a grand jury. Stick your neck out there. Go in there, tell the truth. If I knew this was going to happen, I would have refused to testify. I took a lot of grief over this. It is not... It's not a great place to be where you have to testify against another police officer. Culturally, you keep your mouth shut, and that's it. And at this point, I kind of throw my hands up and say, I can't do anything else.
While the criminal case peters out, the internal affairs case is much more definitive. Investigators don't ignore the evidence they gathered. The findings are scathing. They show that Santos essentially turned a mile-long stretch of the waterfront into his own personal pharmacy, systematically targeting and preying upon some of the city's most vulnerable. And it makes clear that people in the department knew about it. I found at least 4 complaints that went directly to the deputy chief. So when it comes time to hand down punishment, it looks like there could be some accountability, something that would send a message. Nope, not here. Santos was allowed to resign before any discipline was handed out. He's free to go on his way. No penalty, no problem. Today, he lives on a quiet street in a small Florida town, not far from the Gulf Coast. Shortly before wrapping this podcast, I knocked on Santos's door.
Hi, George. My name's Dugan Arnett. I'm a writer at the Boston Globe newspaper.
He answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He was soft-spoken and polite. He invited me in, and we chatted for a few minutes. I told him what would be in the story, and he made clear that he didn't want to comment at all. The New Bedford Police Department wouldn't make anyone available for an interview. In response to my written questions, they emailed a statement. It said that these allegations have been, quote, investigated to resolution and made public, or lacked a credible basis to pursue further investigation. The department also pointed to a 2023 audit with roughly 90 recommendations, including 2 generic ones related to the use of CIs. One recommends that officers be aware of the informant policy. As for Mark Raposo, after the Santos court case collapsed, things get complicated.
I'll tell you, they made my life pretty hard over this. They took years off my life with this.
He feels ostracized by other officers. The bosses change his job duties and his work schedule. And it's impossible for him to see it as anything other than retaliation.
The most upsetting thing was the people who were leaders during this that let this all ride. I mean, George is one thing, but to have my supervisor, have the deputy chief of police brush these concerns off, a DA's office brush them off, and then on top of it, I get removed from my position. It was pretty disheartening.
Not long after the grand jury and IA cases peter out, it occurs to Raposo. There's one last option. One more call he can make.
Did you have to sort of talk yourself into making that call? Like build yourself up to it?
Yeah, because what I figured was, hey, I'm now going to have to go on the record with a federal agency, and I'm going to get fucking fried.
The FBI is his last hope. He's on a side job at a shipyard. He finds a quiet spot, pulls out his cell phone, and dials.
I make a call to the Lakeville FBI office. I talk to a female FBI agent, give her my info. It's some issues in New Bedford. I'm a police officer.
My editor, Brendan, is with me for the interview.
Did you say exactly what the issues were?
Yeah, I told her, there's a police officer who was involved in criminal activity. I think it's going to get covered up. I'd like somebody to talk to. And that was it.
FBI. That's a big deal.
You would think.
After making the call, he waits. And waits.
And I never heard back. Ever. I mean, even I call the FBI and they don't fucking call me back. It's fucking mind-numbing.
I mean, you could have been an informant for the FBI.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you were like, hey, I'm willing.
Yeah. They weren't interested, I guess.
I reached out to the FBI for comment. They said, quote, as a matter of long-standing policy, we cannot confirm or deny the existence of investigations. Mark Raposo took a huge risk talking to me, going on the record with his name to speak out against the police department where he's still employed today.
It's in the interest of the leadership to keep it quiet. They don't want that brought to light because it casts the negative light on the department.
I don't know. He doesn't know what kind of consequences he'll face when this comes out.
Because I know that these guys always pay you back, and they're not known for the upper echelon that are involved in this. They're not known for letting things go.
If the saga of George Santos sparked even a hint of departmental soul searching, I haven't found any evidence of it. In fact, I found a lot of other cases like this in New Bedford, involving many of the same players. And it goes all the way to the top of the department. Mark Raposo is not the only one who's tried to get the attention of the FBI. The feds know a lot about the police department's problems and alleged misconduct, and you're going to hear all about it. But first, I'm going to tell you about an informant whose life is in danger right now.
We heard you was working with the police and shit. Now you gotta get the fuck up out of here. You're gonna get stabbed.
He trusted New Bedford police, and they burned him. Now, he's cowering in a prison cell.
I'm so stressed out, dude. I mean, you're the only number I can call. I'm so stressed out.
I'm going to tell you his story next. Through the course of this podcast, you'll hear how America's informant system has been corrupted. My investigation has uncovered numerous cases of informant misconduct. Lies, corruption, cover-ups of cover-ups. Misdeeds that could cast doubt on countless drug cases, with consequences for drug enforcement everywhere.
Regular people who do not spend a lot of time around the criminal system would just be shocked that we permit this kind of thing to happen in a modern constitutional democracy.
Did he try to turn you?
Yeah. He tried to turn all of us.
This is a very serious allegation. We can't have officers involved in anything like what's being alleged here.
Yes, sir. You're a drug dealer who has the advocacy of one of the top police detectives. We used to call it a license to deal.
There's absolutely no way that they're telling the truth. I am 100,000% sure I am the informant.
You motherfuckers don't rat on each other, so don't start telling my client what the hell he or she should do. Now shut the fuck up and leave me alone.
That's coming up on Snitch City. Spotlight's Snitch City is reported and hosted by me, Dugan Arnett. Additional reporting by Andrew Ryan and Brendan McCarthy. The podcast is written by Max Green and Kristen Nelson, along with me and Brendan McCarthy. Max Green is senior producer. Executive producers are Spotlight editor Brendan McCarthy and Kristen Nelson, the Globe's head of audio. Additional editing and support from Gordon Russell and Kathleen Goldar. Thanks also to Taylor Dolvin for her help translating on the docs. Nancy Barnes is the Boston Globe's executive editor. Sound design and mix by Steven Jackson. Episode artwork by Julian D. Paulson. Art direction by Ryan Huddle. Podcast visualization by Olivia Yarvis and Anush Elbakian. Heather Cyrus is the audience editor. Tim Rasmussen is visuals editor. Legal review by John Albano. Fact-checking by Matt Mahoney. Marketing support for this podcast comes from the Podglomerate.
Lauren here again. If you enjoyed this episode, the rest of the series is available to binge right now. Just follow Spotlight Snitch City on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.